vote, especially in some of the like black districts. I have no idea if those numbers are even real or true. No offense to the
No,
people
no,
saying
no,
that, but like
no.
I saw people.
No, stop.
Mhm.
2.5 million, triple the number of people showed up. Those are facts.
Right. Okay. So
Triple the
like I
number of
saw.
elect. So how's the turnout low? And I get more could have shown up maybe in Dallas and Harris
Right.
counties, maybe. But damn, can we?
No, you right. I was just gonna illustrate what I had seen because I think this is an important point you're making. I saw someone say like one of the counties has 1 million black residents, but only like 100 and something thousand showed up to vote. And I said, is 1 million the raw number? Is it 1 million people over 18 eligible to vote? Or are you just saying 1 million and then going look at the vote? What was the turnout before this? Is it up? Is it down? Like these things matter. It can't like so I've seen people, and the reason I have to say this is because I want to get to my last point on this. But people love to do the like, well, black people somehow messed this up. They love to do that. Her campaign as a black woman somehow messed it up. So like, it's always, Kamala Harris messed it up somehow. It's never just, like you ran the campaign, you lost, but it was a good campaign, right? And so you get to that point where you're talking about blaming black voters, and I just want to flip the polarity on this whole thing, because for the next 8 months, Talarico people need to be trying to turn out black voters. And it's not, and I don't want to hear the shame. I don't want to hear the cajoling, the mocking, any of that shit. Go and talk to them the same way you talking about getting the racist Trump supporters back. What I don't want to hear and what I'm not going to tolerate is you lose in November like y'all been losing, and then we got to hear something about the black vote didn't do it for you.
Yeah, no, we off the
No
table.
excuses.
We off the table. We are not hearing it. As a matter of fact, this is my energy. So let me be schizophrenic for a minute. On
Mhm.
these airwaves, because I do recognize people are listening, I'm going to do everything in my power to make sure in November that Talarico wins. Not because I
Mhm.
like him or I think he's great. I thought Jasmine Crockett would have been a better fighter, but I am politically astute enough to recognize that we need numbers. This is a numbers game at this point, and this is a seat that can be flipped that will allow for there to be more senators who at least can be pressed into doing what we want them to do than
Mhm.
a MAGA Trump person in that seat, period. And I said this all along. Texas is not a red state. It is an underrepresented state. It's a state where people do not show up in the numbers. And I get the disenfranchisement. I get it.
Well, good evening, and welcome to Critical Conversations, a monthly program that we have with the Samuel DeWitt Proctor Conference, where we do discuss issues that are critical to our people, as to Black people, and especially to the Black faith community. And I wanted us to start with that clip from Karen Hunter and Roderick Morrow. Those of you who do Sirius FM, Urban View Radio, Channel 126, you're familiar with her work, and she's just a lightning rod for getting people to think outside of the box and to not fall for the okey doke, the narratives that kind of keep us bound sometimes and thinking a different way. So I wanted us to hear that, because getting the black vote out, but getting the vote out, period, but getting the black vote out is probably more important now than it has been in a very long time. So again, welcome to Critical Conversations. I'm Reverend Susan Smith. I'm the director of the Office of Clergy and Leadership Resource Development for the Samuel DeWitt Proctor Conference. And tonight we are talking about voting. In light of the fact that the Voting Rights Act has been all but been destroyed, the need for African Americans to challenge what's going on and go to the polls is greater than ever before. And we don't have time to be afraid or sit down in our corners and suck our thumbs or pout or talk about all the things that we prophesy about or we philosophize about. We have to do some work. People groan when you talk about voting. They don't want to hear that. And our guests tonight will help explain why that why that is, why people get that way. But our goal is also to impress upon everybody here that voting is not the thing, but it is a necessary part of an overall strategy to make sure Black people have a plan to challenge the forces that are trying to keep us underrepresented or not be represented at all. So our guest tonight will help us understand the concept of voting as a strategy and to understand Jesus not as the savior of all of us, but as I heard Reverend Traci say in a sermon a couple of weeks ago, that Jesus was an organizer and a mobilizer. I love that. And it made me understand even more that being free is no easy thing. So welcome. We're welcoming tonight the Reverend Adam Taylor. He's the president of Sojourners. He is the author of several books. I've known him for a very, very long time, but he said he's got a little bit sick tonight, but he's still here. But he's the president of Sojourners, a Christian nonprofit organization that focuses on the biblical call to social justice. He is also the author of A More Perfect Union, a new vision for building beloved community and mobilizing hope, faith-inspired activism for a post-civil rights generation. Reverend Taylor is ordained in the American Baptist Church and Progressive National Baptist Convention. Welcome, Reverend Adam. Then we have Reverend Traci Blackmon. She is the founder of an organization called Faith Out Loud. She was the associate director, the associate general minister of justice and local church ministries for the United Church of Christ. She resigned her position in 2023, and after a period of sabbatical, just citing she needed some help, but she wanted some rest. But then she came and she founded this organization, which is doing magnificent things in the area of social justice and voting and getting people mobilized and out on the streets during the unrest following the murder of Michael Brown. She was a key leader in St. Louis and Ferguson, and she just helped people to draw together, to be in community, to comfort each other, and all that. And I'll never forget seeing her in action. So welcome, Reverend Traci. And then we have Mrs. Doris Crenshaw. She has been on the front lines for a whole lot of years, working with people to get them involved in the voting process, the civic engagement process, especially young people. She's a senior consultant to Alabama Power Company, and she's the founder and the CEO of the Southern Youth Leadership Development Institute. She has over 60 years, of community activist experience. And 1955, at the age of 12, she served as vice president of the NAACP Youth Council when Mrs. Rosa Parks was the advisor to the Youth Council. So after completing her degree at Clark College, she continued her community outreach in Chicago with Dr. Martin Luther King on the open housing campaign. She has been on them streets or in them streets, as we talk about all the time. So welcome, Reverend. I call you Reverend, but Mrs. Crenshaw, welcome. I'm so glad that you're here with us this evening. So I wanted to start off with just a question. In your own words, what do you think is this? If I were to say to you, which I am going to say to you, what is the state of where we are now? What if you had to if somebody was asking you from a foreign country, what is going on in America? What's the state? What's going on with y'all? How would you answer that? Anybody? Start with you, Reverend Adam, then you can talk and then rest your voice for a minute.
All right. Well, first, thanks for the invitation. I promise my voice is not always this raspy. I know my wife loves it, but I'm ready for this to be over and to be fully healthy. But it's good to be with you, Reverend Susan, Reverend Traci, and Doris. I would really say that we are in a pretty severe crisis. It is not the first crisis we've been in, but it is in many ways kind of a defining civil rights type moment for this time. And, I used to often think that I was born in the wrong era, that I should have been born to kind of come of age just as the civil rights movement was really at its fore, and that I would have been on the front lines of so much of what the Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee was doing. And as I've grown older, I've realized, or at least come to realize, that, God had an intention for my call and my life, and that I was born to face, and we were born to face the threats that we're facing right now. And some of those threats are very old. We see, kind of the gene, the mutating gene of white supremacy continue to show up in our current moment. And there are some things about this moment that are, I think, a little bit different and unprecedented. particularly in the context of a political moment where we have arguably one of the most narcissistic presidents ever,
Oh my gosh.
who is seeking to not only consolidate power, but is willing to abuse and destroy freedom, destroy our checks and balances, and really destroy our democracy in order to hold on to power at all costs and to really impose on the country a kind of white Christian nationalist vision, which we can certainly come back to. So, I would say that really is a moment of crisis, but I don't think crisis is inevitable. I think there's so much that we can and must do to avert so much of the harm that is being created. And, hopefully we'll talk about this tonight, but, our democracy, as flawed as it's been throughout our history, always is a work in progress, but is not always a given. And I think
Mm,
that we're at this moment where, the right to vote, the freedom to vote is under assault. And our democracy itself is no longer a given in terms of how we have understood it. And so this is the kind of moment we have to re-engage and struggle. We're using some new wineskins in
mm,
order to not only save our quote unquote democracy, but ultimately save it so that we can transform it, so
mm,
we can actually achieve a multiracial just democracy that we deserve.
mm. Mrs. Crenshaw, you've been on the battlefield for a long time. How is this period of time where we have this thrust of just, I don't know, just stupid injustice, I think. How does it compare to what you were up against when you were on the front lines when 60 years ago? Mrs. Crenshaw, did she freeze? She must have frozen. All right. Traci, okay, then we'll come back to Mrs. Crenshaw. You answered the question. Anything to add to what Adam said in terms of what is this? What does it feel like to you? How does it feel different than what you learned about before? What is it? What is it?
Well, first, I want to thank you, Susan, for the opportunity to be with you. I watch your show a lot, and so I'm honored to be here as a guest tonight and to be here with such esteemed colleagues as Adam and Mrs. Crenshaw. I indeed consider it a privilege. I've been looking at this in a lot of ways. I agree with everything that Reverend Taylor has said. Um, and I'm also looking at it from not just a major crisis, but perhaps what I hope will turn into a major opportunity for us to reclaim our rightful place in this fight and to also um, reclaim our spiritual authority in this fight. And so I think about a couple of things, none of which will be new to all of you, but historian Phyllis Tickle did quite a bit of work about the emergent church, and she talked from a historic reference about how every 500 years the church gets heavy with its own religious rhetoric and it can't stand it anymore. It shakes everything off. She calls it a garage sale. I call it the Christmas tree that falls off over because of too many ornaments. And then we're left just with the essence of the faith to start all over again, hanging our religious dogma on it. If we follow that every 500 years since the establishment of the church, we are in that season right now of the garage sale. And it just happens to coincide with the time when we have um, a political a political fiasco in our administration in ways that I'm sure is not as bad as it has been, but it's as bad as it has been in my lifetime of awareness, right? And so those things converging in a society where many have felt abandoned and forgotten, have left us in a place where we forgot that voting, yes, was a sacrifice for those who came before us. And we should reverence that as sacrificial. And voting has been promoted for us as a solution, and it's never been that. We've always had to fight to defend ourselves. To I hope that we will come out this time understanding voting as a strategy, and something that we have to continue to do every time. Now, I'm not saying our elders don't understand that. I'm saying that perhaps there are those in our communities who don't see it as a strategy. And my fear in this moment is that we're exerting all of our energy on the battle because that's the crisis ahead of us. Um, but the motivation comes from the hope of building, right? And so I'm hoping that in this moment, we will yes, defeat what we're facing now, but not stop there, and make this an opportunity to reclaim some things that we, um, I won't say that we relinquish, but that we allowed to be taken from us. I can't get over the fact that 90 million eligible voters who were already registered, eligible voters, simply did not vote. Now, that simply for me is because I don't know all of the circumstances. I'm sure there were complex circumstances, and I'm sure there were good for nothing circumstances. But 9 million people sat out the last national election. And before we go down a road of saying, that I'm suggesting those are all Black people. I'm not. Only 14 million of them were Black. But we only needed 1 million not to be here, right? So I'm in a mixed up place about it because I acknowledge that it's a crisis. I acknowledge it's an emergency. And I acknowledge that it's not just a political crisis, it's a social and spiritual crisis.
Right.
And I'm concerned about all three.
That's good. And excuse me, when I was introducing you, did I say that you were a trustee of the Samuel DeWitt Proctor Conference? I don't remember that I said that, but everybody, she is a trustee of the Samuel DeWitt Proctor Conference. I just needed to say that. Thank you very much.
Another honor I'm grateful for.
Mrs. Crenshaw, you were on the battlefield 60 years ago when people marched from Selma to Montgomery wanting the right to vote, and now you're here. What is the difference between what you went through and experienced then and what you're experiencing now?
Well, I wanted to address the question that you first came with.
Go ahead. That's fine.
And I agree with my sister, Reverend Blackmon, who said opportunity. I see it as an opportunity. And I view it as Esther time for us, who came to, and you know the Esther story.
Mm-hmm.
So my deal is that we need to get off the Zoom and get in the room. We have, I don't know who all the we is, but we who are talking about people who do not vote, is I think people do not really understand. I think that politicians talk to people about bringing jobs that do not exist, that they talk to about doing things that they will not do. But I think that if we can understand, people understand that voting impacts everything in our lives. It impacts the texture of your toilet paper. It impacts the type of water that you drink. I think that we need to get down and dirty and in the room with people who do not vote. And when I address people, they really, some of them say, well, it doesn't make a difference. And some of them say, well, I don't like the man and I don't like, but I think that the more we talk to people, and we did more getting in the room and talking to people, and just because they told us the first time that they were not going out to vote, we went back to them several times and get to understand. And we have to be of the mindset that the Lord gave us 2 ears and 1 mouth. That means that we need to listen twice as much as we're talking to people. And we need to hear the why. But I don't think that we're going to get all of them, but I certainly think that we can get 9 million more of them in the nation to vote. I am very optimistic based on when we had the rally here in Montgomery, and on 6 days' notice, 6,000 people showed up in Montgomery, Black and white and Indian and Asian and all walks of life showed up. And I think people every day are saying that I mean, this man has really, I mean, anyway, I don't want to get on him. That's what we're here to talk about. We're talking about our people. And anyway, that's what you asked me. But you asked me another question about the difference between now then and now. The difference that I see is that we stop talking to our people. We don't talk, period, to each other. If we go to a restaurant today, the people in the restaurant, two of them came to the restaurant together, and both of them had the phone up, texting or whatever. In our homes, we don't talk to each other. People eat at a different time. We used to come to the dinner table at 6 o'clock or whatever time, and everybody came to eat at that time. When we go to church, there are 5 members of the church, and they have 5 different cars driving to church. So we have a no talk policy, period. And I think if we need to get back to, as I say, get off the Zoom and get in the room and with our people, all people.
Powerful. So true. Thank you so much. So we began this conversation kind of, I didn't begin it with Adam, but Reverend Damien did. And we were talking about the work that Sojourners is doing. So Adam, I'd like you to talk about it. We're going to talk about the strategy thing, but I think the work that is being done is really important for people to know. So can you talk a little bit about the work that you're doing, just overall? He works with, well, he's the president of Sojourners, but he works with the Skinner Institute, and they do a lot of good things around the country. And so if you could explain some of that to the people, that would be great.
Yeah, no, absolutely. So I want to contextualize that work just a little bit. So, we've been talking about a crisis, and I agree that there's also a spiritual dimension to this crisis. So thank you for putting that on the table, Reverend Traci. That, is certainly tied into, the 12 million plus Black voters who didn't vote in the last election and the 90 million overall who didn't vote. But they're underneath or fueling and contributing to that crisis is a real crisis that has been growing over time of voter suppression, of efforts to deny or to make it more difficult for our community, the Black community, but also the brown community, and in some cases, younger voters, elderly voters, from being able to exercise their freedom to vote. And we have to take that seriously because we have seen this before. Certainly Ms. Crenshaw knows it well from the times of Jim Crow segregation. It is now showing up in a more sophisticated, sometimes more covert form, but it still has the same intent. And now that the Supreme Court, through the Louisiana versus Cali decision about a month ago, as you said, Reverend Susan, gutted the Voting Rights Act, the crowning jewel achievement of the civil rights movement, it has opened up the floodgate for state legislators to redraw districts to essentially diminish, if not to destroy, Black voting power and representation across the South. And that is the strategy, right? And so a lot of this kind of was triggered by another Supreme Court decision in 2013 called Shelby versus Holder. And it was a decision where the Supreme Court basically said that the pre-clearance provision of the Voting Rights Act was no longer necessary. It actually kind of set the stage for the more recent Cali decision by kind of saying, hey, we've made so much progress. We are now in this fictional colorblind society that we no longer need to require Southern states, and in some cases Midwestern states, to clear any changes they make to their voting laws with the Justice Department, because we know that was necessary for so many years and still is necessary. So what happened after 2013? You had hundreds of new bills being proposed across the country, particularly in the South, that tried to find creative ways to create new barriers and restrictions on voting. They put in voting ID laws that disproportionately hurt low-income folks, disproportionately Black folks. They put in provisions that make it easier to purge voters. They put in provisions that enabled the moving of polling sites or the closure of voting sites with concentrated in Black communities. So there's been a whole series of measures and efforts that have made it more difficult for our community to vote. So in light of what happened in 2013, Sojourners came together with the Skinner Leadership Institute, which is led by Dr. Barbara Williams Skinner, who used to lead the Congressional Black Caucus, like their kind of foundation arm, and Reverend Jim Wallace, who's my predecessor at Sojourners. And we knew that this was going to open up the floodgates for new efforts to target and restrict voting, particularly among Black voters. And so we co-created a campaign called Face United to Save Democracy, because we believe that any effort to try to deny someone the right to vote is an attack on Imago Dei, the core Christian conviction that we are made in the very image and likeness of God. Our vote is our voice. It is how we kind of leverage power, at least one critical way, not the only way, of course. And so we really try to frame these efforts as a religious crisis, as a religious assault on the Imago Dei itself. And so we formed a partnership with pretty much all the historically Black denominations. We formed a partnership with many of the mainline Protestant denominations, with Catholic organizations. More recently, in the last kind of 8 years, we've expanded it to make it truly multi-faith. So we have a partnership with the Religious Action Center for Reform Judaism. And the goal is to mobilize religious voices, religious leaders at the state and local level to be on the front lines of pushing back against efforts to deny people the right to vote and to ensure that people can vote in free, fair, and safe elections. It feels kind of surreal to have to make that argument that that's something that we need to do in this day and age. But we know there's also been a real threat of disinformation, of harassment of election workers and of voters, of intimidation, and even of violence. Fortunately, we have not seen violence happen at a significant scale, but the threat is very much there, particularly given the rhetoric of our current president, who continues to double down on these ludicrous lies that the 2020 election was stolen because of widespread voter fraud, right? He continues to claim the only way the Democrats can win, he did this in the State of the Union, is if Democrats cheat. He is literally trying to create the pretense to get his base riled up, to distrust our election system. And if their side doesn't win in these midterms, they're going to assume it is because of cheating or of fraud. And that could literally lead to violence, if not lead to efforts to try to subvert the results or delegitimize the results. So concretely what we do, I'll just say this really quickly, we do voter education work to make sure people know what their rights are and to really try to communicate what is at stake in the election. I hope we can come back to some of that later. We organize meetings with election officials to try to hold them accountable for conducting free, fair, and safe elections. We meet with secretaries of state. We actually have a meeting tomorrow with Reverend Cynthia Hale and Reverend Paul Little and a number of other religious leaders who are meeting with one of the associate secretaries of state in the state of Georgia as a part of that process. We are training faith leaders to serve as what we call poll chaplains or peacekeepers. So last election cycle in 2024, we trained 1,000 faith leaders to be poll chaplains in states like Ohio and Michigan and Georgia and North Carolina and Arizona and Florida and more. And concretely, what they do is they welcome people to the polls. We want voting to be a positive experience. We don't want people to feel intimidated or afraid to go to the polls. They're trained in the basic election law so they can detect if there are shenanigans that are happening, if people are being denied the ability to vote or to cast a provisional ballot. And they are trained in de-escalation training and peacemaking training so that they can help to prevent and deter harassment or intimidation and violence. We have a partnership with the Lawyers Committee on Civil Rights and the Brennan Center that helps to make all of this work. And then we've added another stage, which is sadly really necessary, which is to try to make sure faith leaders are ready to respond if there is any efforts to disrupt the vote counting process, which we think is increasingly likely, to confiscate voting machines like the administration did in Fulton County in Georgia, to claim that results are delegitimate without any evidence, which we expect them to likely do. So there's a whole series of different scenarios that could literally really disrupt, if not sabotage, the election results of this election. We've got to be ready to engage in moral resistance. And so we've got a whole phase that's doing that work. I'm grateful that we're, increasingly trying to kind of partner with some of the work that Reverend Traci's doing. So I hope she gets to speak about Faith Out Loud and so much of the work they're doing as well. But I really do believe this is a kind of defining moment for us, not just because of an election taking place, but because if we don't protect the results of this election and ensure that people have the ability to cast their vote without any issues, then we are really going to see the erosion and ultimately the destruction of our democracy itself.
I appreciate that. And I am going to ask Traci to talk about her work with Faith Out Loud. I do want to share that something that Mrs. Crenshaw said that really resonates with me when I started, getting in them streets, just I need to get in the streets and to talk to people. And I was shy, and they said, knock on some doors. And I thought, oh, I can't knock on nobody's door. If I don't know you, I can't talk to you. But I found that the more I talked to people, the response was just so, even if they weren't going to say they were going to vote, they just wanted to talk about what they were doing and what they were feeling and what they didn't have. And, for somebody who's shy, my thing was, I'm gonna go up and say hi, do you want to vote, and leave and go on to the next house. But I found that I got caught up in houses and stayed for a very long time because people talked. But I do think that being in community is key and part of the strategy. And one of the things that I'll never forget, I was walking the streets in the hood. I was walking the streets. I was talking to the brothers in the car places. They have all them beat up cars that nobody can fix, and they're sitting around. And I went up to this guy just, to say, "Are you gonna vote?" "No, I ain't gonna vote." The usual thing. "It ain't gonna do no good. My vote doesn't count." But I said, "Don't you know that you have power?" And I think this whole thing of letting our people know that we have power, that we don't hold on to, we don't even believe we have it. I said, don't you know? So somebody has said in one of my training sessions, has said, everybody who's been arrested knows who the police officer, the arresting officer was, who the prosecutor was, who the warden is. They know all of that stuff. So, and they can make a change. So I asked this guy, I said, have you ever been arrested? He said, yeah. And he said, my brother too. And he kind of went on. I said, well, who was your arrest? And everything that trainer told me, he knew the arresting officer, he knew the prosecutor, he knew the judge. And I said, well, do you know that because you know all those people, you have the power to get rid of them if they have done something wrong? And he looked at me and he said, you're, ishing me. And I said, no, I'm not. And I was talking about the case of Tamir Rice. I said, have you heard of him? And he said, yeah. And I said, well, the people in Cleveland, got together and they voted that prosecutor out. He said, you issued me again. I said, no, I'm telling you the honest truth. And before, as I was leaving, he said, hey, y'all, come on, we got to talk about this. That kind of community building, that just made my heart sing. So when Reverend, I keep calling you Reverend Crenshaw, forgive me, I'm not going to be able to stop. But anyway, when Ms. Crenshaw started talking about that, I really realized how that whole concept of community and the community that we had growing up is so critical. And it's going to be even more critical now. So I had to put that in there. So I talked too long. But Reverend Traci, talk about your work, please, with Faith Out Loud.
Well, I want to talk about it in the context of this conversation because it's going to take all of what we've been talking about. Adam and Sojourners and Dr. Barbara Williams Skinner have created a marvelous program for training poll chaplains, and we certainly are going to be sending people to those trainings. We're already registering people for the 3 that remain. But we are going to build also in this moment on what happened in Selma and Alabama. So starting Juneteenth, we're going to have revivals going all through the South. And I'm doing one in Philadelphia just for good measure because of what's happening in Philadelphia. And these are not just revivals for shouting, though shouting is good. And in this moment, we do need some shouting. But we are combining that with a program that is going to put organizers on the ground that are 18 to 24 years old as Freedom Fellows. We want them to do just what Mrs. Crenshaw is talking about, to talk to people their age. They're being trained to do community talkbacks and go to barbershops and hang out on the corner and invite people into the church to have a conversation if they want to have a conversation in the church on the level that people can understand. I remain convinced that you can't move people until you see people. You have to be interested in what they're interested in. And before we can get them to the polls, we have to be able to reclaim the connection that we've lost in our communities. a lot of good work is happening in the churches, but a lot of people don't come into the churches, even if they live next door to the church. And the answer is not to keep doing things in the church hoping they're going to come. The answer is for the church to get out of the building and go into the streets and talk. And that's where we think we're going to be able to make a difference. So this summer, anticipating that many people who might have had summer jobs may have trouble finding summer jobs because of this administration, in every city that we're in, we're putting at least 2 Freedom Fellows on the ground for 40 hours a week, $20 an hour for 40 hours a week. Through November. And so we're really excited about this opportunity, and the pastors are excited about this opportunity, which allows them, they have an application that they can fill out online, but they have to have a recommendation from their pastor because we also want to involve them doing work in the church. That's one piece. The other piece that we're initiating is called a rites of passage for civic engagement. We have become a society that is separated, not just geographically, we're separated economically, we're separated because of our different levels of intellectual pursuit. And it has caused distances in our communities that I didn't grow up with. I grew up in Birmingham, Alabama. I'm 63 years old, and my parents had good jobs. We had a nice house. But because it was Birmingham, Alabama in the 60s, we lived together differently, right? So my mother was an executive secretary for the Alabama Power Company. My father worked in the steel plant, but next door was my kindergarten teacher, and across the street was my high school principal. Well, he wasn't my high school principal, but he was a high school principal. And up the street was my orthodontist, and UW Clemens was the first person, a black person in Congress in my age, and he had the first swimming pool. And so all the kids would come to his house and go to the swimming pool. We don't have that community connection. And the opportunity we have now is to reclaim it in a different way. I'm not talking about going back to the 60s, but our churches that are in neighborhoods where we have a lot of people driving into worship and driving out, we're going to have to find ways to have activities for the people who actually live there. And so we're doing that at the churches that we're meeting every Sunday after church, having a Sunday Salah. If the weather is nice, it'll be outside with popsicles and snow cones just to have conversation. And we're hoping in this rites of passage class that will be a part of the boot camp that will be happening at each of these schools. We've partnered with Stacey Abrams' organization with the 10 steps, and they will come in and they will teach this civic engagement, because it's not enough just to tell people to vote. You also have to help people know how to vote. You have to help people understand the strategy of voting, that maybe you don't have a perfect candidate. Maybe you don't have a candidate that can deliver everything that you want or has an unblemished record. The question is, what is the strategy and where are we trying to get? And so we're going to begin these boot camps, not with talking to people, but inviting them into a visioning session. We're hiring people to even craft that vision as they're bringing it out, to draw it so we can see what is the world that we want to live in and how do we want to create it together. So that may not seem like it's directly related to voting, but there's so many people out here doing the nuts and bolts organizing work. We have to do the community building work. We have to do the trust building work. We have to do, there were some things I did because I trust the people that asked me to do it even. And we've lost some of that. The other thing that we're not addressing, but I'm thinking about, and I hope if somebody is thinking about, we're also living in an age where all of our communication really is being infiltrated. And you never know if what you're hearing is the truth or not. We really don't have news anymore. We have commercials and we have opinions. And so I am advocating for some trusted sources of news for the Black community, that if you hear this voice, you can trust what they're saying, that you're not just opening up social media and, unfortunately, our president He's not good at a lot of things, but he's good at marketing. And so he does things like hold checks and then makes his signature be the signature on the check. It's a little bitty check anyway, but then it makes you think that he's doing something if you're not engaged. And so we're also have to fight this media war. And Faith Out Loud can't do all of that. But these are the things that we want to contribute. We want to build community again. And we want to, inside of the church, remind us that at the core of the gospel is an Afro-Semitic rabbi named Jesus, who was the greatest organizer of all times, who took 12 raggedy people he found at the seashore, and we're still talking about that movement. We're still talking about what he was able to do, right? And so discipleship, the act of discipleship, is more than believing. It is embodying what Jesus did in his ministry. And what he did in his ministry are the things that people care about today still. And if we can show that we care about them and that there's a pathway to make a difference in their lives, and part of that strategy is voting. And in this particular upcoming election, the reason that's important is not because everything is going to change overnight, but because we have to stop the bleed before we can start to heal. I believe we can move people to the polls. I believe this is an opportunity, and not just to the polls, but back to one another.
Powerful.
Amen. Amen.
Mrs. Crenshaw, as we're listening to what Reverend Traci just said, the community, that's so important. And you have a long and successful track record of talking to young people and getting them to move from the periphery where we often cast them into the center of the work. Can you share a little bit about that work and how it's going and why it's
I
working?
will. But my sister, I think it was Reverend Blackmon, who said they were sending people to the South, and she named Georgia. I want to ask this body, if this group, my new friends, if we would consider Alabama, because Shamari figures they redrew his district, so it's 40% Black, I think. So they call it an opportunity district, but they think that they can take that. And we have primary in August. So I'm going to put that out
Ms.
there.
Crenshaw, you know LaTasha Brown did not let me get out of Alabama. Not only did she want 2, she wants 6 people. 2 in Montgomery, 2 in Selma, and 2 in Birmingham.
All
So
right.
that's a done deal. Yes,
That's
ma'am.
a done deal. That's a deal. Okay, so we talked about me and the young people that I talk to every day for 8 weeks. We are training them to become organizers and advocates for voting. We did a week-long sessions with Black Voters Matters and ACLU. And they learned the telephone bank. They learned about every constitutional office in Alabama and what it means to them, how it impacts their lives. Today, we went to visit with the superintendent of education. They knew about the superintendent, what his job was, what the board does, and we set for the board meeting. And they had like called board meeting, but then we gave them an assignment that they were to bring 5 people to the next school board meeting and to have questions for them and that. So we're engaging them. And I think that's what happened to me. We were engaged when I was young. When I was 12, I was out registering voters and whatever. But so the young people in my group are between 12 and 18. And you would marvel at, Damien is just so excited about them. But when they come in there, they they won't look you in the eye and they have their head down and you ask them what the name is and not. But they've been there 2 weeks and you can ask them what the name is, what the school is, about voting, why they vote, and all this in 2 weeks. So now we're about the business of taking them to the city council tomorrow and to the county commission tomorrow, and we're going to the state legislature, and so they're going to be telephone banking, but also they are being assigned that we have a guy that we have the registered voters and we have the people that have voted, and we're calling the people that have not voted, and we're trying to engage them. And they're about that. What I do know is that in the movement that you all now call the movement, it was women and youth. Every successful movement in the world is propelled by women and youth. This I know. So that I know this too, that there's nothing that a child asks for their parents to do that they don't do. They say, I want a Mercedes. They might not get a Mercedes, but they get a Volkswagen or something. They get a vehicle. So we know that these children can convince their parents if they want to. So we're trying to light a fire in there that they convince their parents, but not only that, their auntie, their uncle, and Wine Willie and all of them in the family to go out to vote. So, but they're on fire, y'all. They are on fire. Let me tell you, they're on their parents if their parents have them late getting to Southern Youth at 8:15 in the morning. And they asked me why they can't meet on Friday, because we meet from Monday through Thursday. But I think that what my high school principals told us about schools are there to provide an opportunity for you to learn. And I think that we in this business need to provide an opportunity for young people to express themselves and to be involved.
So powerful, and necessary. And the younger people in the group that you're working with, and then the
Is
ones
that
that are
what you asked me? That's the question. I don't know.
I don't know, but it was a good answer. I take it. But as you're talking about these young kids, I'm also thinking about the group of people, I don't know, millennials and whatever's after millennials. That I think that group of people we've kind of abandoned too. I don't know if that's the right word. But the reason I say that, and I want any of you to address this, is because so many of them, and that whole millions of Black people that didn't vote, a lot of them were in this particular group. And they were angry. And I'm talking from experience. My son in his 30s,
He's 13.
No, he's 30, in his
30.
30s.
Okay.
Old enough to know better, right? But he was so disturbed about Gaza and the genocide going on in Gaza. And when I tried to have conversations with him about how about the genocide that's going on here, it wouldn't even penetrate, Mrs. Crenshaw, it wouldn't penetrate. And so he was so disturbed. And what he said was, nobody listens to us. Nobody listens to us. And I said, well, I listen. I just don't agree. But for a group of people in this age group, I think that was a stumbling block. And I'm wondering if y'all think that stumbling block still exists and how the work that you're all doing can address that problem and that issue. Anybody can answer that.
Well, I'll go first. It absolutely exists. And it exists because we have yet to have a perfect democracy or perfect political options, even. And what's missing from that, though, is strategy. Because someone is going to lead. And should we settle for good enough or the worst or the best of two evils? No. But we have to stop the bleed first. And so I was in some of those backdoor conversations, especially at the DNC, when the room was very tense about Gaza and the pressure was heavy for Kamala Harris to say more than she was saying, and she didn't. And I don't want to say that everybody in that room said, well, then the hell with it, because that's not true. But we knew that we were facing a moment where there were some people just on moral principles said, we're not going to elect anyone who cannot say unequivocally that they're going to end this war on Gaza. And that's a moral stance to take. However, the option that left us with was where we are now.
Mhm.
And I'm not blaming, this is not a blame game for me. I'm saying that's why it's so important for us to talk about strategy. When I talk to young people, I'm 63 now, so 30 is young to me. When I have conversations with young people, they want something different than what we have. They want real democracy. They want options that don't make them choose between the lesser of two evils.
Right.
And
I
that's
heard that.
where the impetus came from for this visioning project. Because if you can see the world you imagine, then you can get to that world. It's not as easy as saying, well, we want to abolish the police. Then we have to talk about how are we going to self-govern if we do that? What can we imagine together? And then what are the steps we have to take to get there? For this coming election, one of those steps is that we have to stop the bleed. We have to stop the hemorrhaging. But we shouldn't try to shut down those conversations, because they come from a moral principle
They do.
that many of us have given them ourselves
Mhm.
in our teachings, in our
Mhm.
biblical readings. We just have to realize that voting is never going to be the solution by itself. It is
Right.
a part of a strategy.
This is so powerful. Adam and Mrs. Crenshaw, answer, you can address that question too, because I think it's a major, major thing right now.
Yeah, no. I really resonate with what Reverend Traci just said. I mean, I just want to underscore that, guilting and shaming young people into voting is not an effective strategy,
That's not
nor do I
right.
think it is a right strategy, right? And in some ways, you got to meet them at the point of anguish and their righteous rage, because it is real. I mean, I felt that in the midst of the war that then resulted in war crimes and a genocide in Gaza. And, certainly worked through my organization to try to block it and to really, really put pressure on the Biden administration, and ultimately was unsuccessful. But I also realized that, we are, when you don't vote, when you make a decision not to vote, you are at least implicitly then kind of endorsing, not necessarily endorse, but allowing whatever outcome happens without your ability to influence it, right? So I'm a proud member of Alpha Phi Alpha Fraternity Incorporated. We have long had a campaign whose motto is "A voteless people is a hopeless people."
Mhm.
And that was very much tied into defending and securing the right to vote, which we still have to do, as we talked about earlier. But now we also have to convince and persuade and inspire a lot more young people
Mhm.
that it is not only worth their time and energy to vote, it is actually essential that they vote, right?
Mhm.
And some of that is like, and we talked about this a little bit, but just to really name the consequences that we have seen as a result of them not voting, right? And you can't always draw a direct line to these things, but by 12 million plus Black Americans not voting in 2024, and many others not voting and voting in certain ways, it resulted in a second Trump term.
Mhm.
And by not voting, we have seen racialized patrols, ICE patrols on our streets that are stopping Black and brown people, and a huge amount of violence inflicted on our communities as a result of the mass deportation policy of this administration. We have seen dramatic cuts in healthcare for people living in poverty, in other words, Medicaid. We have seen 3 million people lose their access to food stamps, and we're seeing massive lines at food banks around the country. We have seen an immoral and illegal war of choice in Iran that has jacked up gas prices more than $5 a gallon all across the country. And that's certainly hurting all of us, right? And I could go down a long list, but I'm trying to just use some examples about how to try to tie voting into things that impact people's everyday
Yeah.
lives, right? And that's going to vary by the person in terms of what's going to kind of motivate them the most. But I've realized, like, and I've really stopped doing this. I feel like, and this is just my own like moment of like confession and repentance. In 2024, I feel like I was too focused on democracy being at stake in this election. And it was, right? And that didn't land for a lot of people, right?
Didn't-
You can't eat and drink democracy,
No.
right? And so I have focused a lot more of our messaging now on how does this impact your core freedoms, like your ability to practice the religion you want to practice, i.e., religious freedom. How does it affect your ability to protest, which is also a critical way in which you exercise power? And how does it impact a lot of the core things that do impact your daily life and the things that you care about for your community? I'll just end by really also affirming what Reverend Traci mentioned about vision. The book of Proverbs says, where there lack vision, the people perish. And I do think that we have to help people imagine a different reality. That is a big part of what faith is all about, right? Creating a bridge between our broken current reality and the promise of what can be, right? And so I do think that we have to engage in more of this envisioning. And one of the visions that animated the civil rights movement, really the kind of North Star vision of the civil rights movement, was the vision of the beloved community. It's one that Dr. King referenced, but also Fannie Lou Hamer and Ella Baker and so many other leaders. And I'm not wedded to the words beloved community, although they resonate deeply with me. But I am really convinced that we do need to cast a bold and unifying vision for this country. And part of what I try to do in the book that you mentioned, Reverend Susan, is
Get your nose
try
beans
to do
off.
kind of a remix of the beloved community for our current time, right? And so my best and most succinct definition of what that looks like is to build an America, to build communities where neither punishment nor privilege is tied to our race or ethnicity or to our gender or to our religion or to our sexual orientation. It's to build an America where our growing diversity is seen as a strength and not a threat, and to build an America where everyone is equally valued, everyone is equally respected, and everyone is enabled to thrive.
And
And,
that,
you
oh, go
know,
ahead. I'm sorry.
no, no. So just, I love the vision in part because, it's very aspirational, yes, but it's also really measurable. Like we can measure whether any decision or policy or budget either reinforces and exacerbates the way in which punishment and privilege is so often tied to those core parts of our identity, most powerfully race, or we can measure whether it actually reverses that and dismantles that and changes that. And if we really truly want to become a nation of liberty and justice for all, I think it's that kind of vision that we have to not only appeal to, but help to live into.
And I appreciate what you're saying. And I also know this, that most of us do not know that fundamentally, the very core, maybe we know it, but we don't really think about it. But at the core of this nation, they never wanted it to be, they never wanted there to be equality for all. They did not want it. It was particularly stated. They thought that the Brits that came across the Atlantic, they called that their wilderness experience. That was their, and they were coming to the promised land. When you read it, it just blows your mind. And they really, really believed and believe that group of people believed that the founding fathers, in their words, they didn't really mean them. So you have people throughout history who are like Franklin Pierce, President Franklin Pierce, when around the Dred Scott decision time, he said that he really believed that the founding fathers did not believe what they wrote in the Declaration of Independence, that they did not mean that all people were created equal. They meant all white men were. I mean, they said stuff like that. And when you go into the history books and you read that stuff, then you come out and you scratch your head, because we're operating. It's almost like we who want democracy um, are a small group compared to historically to the group of people who have wanted this country to be a slaveocracy. That is what they believed in and believe in. And so when I think about that, I wonder then, how do we communicate the vision, and how then, what is the strategy, Reverend Traci, that we develop to help people give the lessons or do whatever it needs to be done for the whole concept of democracy to be really understood and internalized and taught by people, because we believe in something that a whole bunch of people do not believe in. It's like, I was thinking today that we have one God, supposedly, and we got all these different versions, all these different versions. We have one Bible. Thomas Jefferson wrote his own. The people over in England wrote their own. So we have these things that I call sacred documents, but other people just move them and manipulate them. And if we are not aware that we are doing the teaching, if we're not aware of that, I'm not sure how effective we can be. Well, we can always be effective.
I
I'm not
want to
sure.
remind you, though, Reverend Susan.
Okay.
I want to
Okay.
remind you
Okay.
that we've done it before.
We have. We have.
Done it before. This is not new behavior.
It is not. It is not.
We've done it before. And I've been leaning into, some people who are listening to us might disagree with me, but one of the visioning opportunities I see is the election of Mondami in New York.
Yeah.
Nobody thought that was possible. Every force was against it. And yet the people went out and voted and made a difference. And time again, this is the third Reconstruction. We've done this before.
Yeah.
Time and time again, when we show up, we show out.
That's right.
And that's the hope that we have to fuel people with. Not imaginary hope,
Right.
but the truth that when we show up, we always show out and we get what we're after. Even if you look at Ms. Crenshaw, I would love to hear you talk about this. Like, how in the heck did we get a Civil Rights Act in the middle of all the stuff that was happening? It's because we showed up. And we have to tell that story in a way that is not about guilting people.
Right.
It is not about, discounting people's real lived experiences and the way hope has been deflated. We are hope builders. And that hope is not built on a false narrative.
Right.
That hope is an inspired narrative. I've been working, and you got me riled up, but I'm gonna be quiet in just a minute. But I've been working on this piece that I want to put out for the 250th, right? That everybody calls the Liberty Bell as some symbol of freedom, but it wasn't the Liberty Bell until it cracked so much it couldn't ring. The abolitionists are the ones who named it the Liberty Bell. And it sounds louder in its silence than it ever did when it was ringing. That's the moment that we're in. We've got to tap into the human piece of this and say, you have the ability to make change. The president really doesn't do anything. They make all these laws, but the laws go nowhere unless we are the ones who make them happen. And we have to really tap into young people and old people knowing that we have power. We have power. I'm not powerless.
Right.
And our people are not powerless.
Right.
We have done more with less, and we're going to do it again.
Absolutely.
Amen.
I agree wholeheartedly. And I like you talking about hope. Because in the freedom songs that we sang, even in the anthem, we shall overcome, there's hope. And in a lot of this little light of mine, let it shine. We need to, let me tell you something. I have a whole lot of hope with these young people. We just need to talk to them. We need to give them direction. And as I started out this conversation is provide an opportunity. And we need to be in the business of that. But Reverend Blackmon, is that the Reverend over there from Birmingham, Alabama?
Yes, ma'am.
Reverend Blackmon, we want to see you in Montgomery in August,
Yes,
and very soon. And
yes.
Would you share my number with Reverend Blackmon and everybody on the panel? But because we need you here. We talked about what happens in the South. The South determines. What was the theme for the thing we just did, Sister Blackmon?
All roads lead to the South.
All roads leads to the South. And it does. But we need to make sure that we get Samari figures elected. I'm right, we vote, we're nonpartisan, right? So whatever.
Right.
But at any rate, we need you in Alabama. And the other thing is that in November, we'll be electing a governor. And I think we can win this, but we need to turn out our votes. And I will share the information that we had about the Black voter turnout in the primary was up. The white voter turnout in Alabama was down. We need to keep the Black vote up, and I think we can do it.
One of the
But we
things
need to,
Stacey Abrams said to me that keeps ringing in my mind, she said, they're counting on what they can see,
Right.
but we're counting on what we know.
that's right.
And we know that we can do this. We can do this. We've done it before, and we're going to do it again. We're going to do it.
We always do. We are. You're right. We always do. We always do. Even when they burned down Greenwood, people were out in those tents and those camps outside, and they just decided they were going to rebuild, and they didn't get money. They didn't get insurance claims
That's right.
money. They didn't get they just built. And so that's right. That's who we
And
are.
people are waking up. In 10 days, 6,000 people descended on Montgomery.
Right.
And before they went to Montgomery, 1,000 people met us in Selma to pray over the day.
Right.
2 days later in Mississippi, 32,000 people showed up the first day of early voting. I don't know, Adam, your numbers, but I know Dr. Skinner told me y'all had to add new registration, new classes for poll watchers because people were signing up. We got this.
Reverend Taylor, we need some ministers down here.
We'll
In
count me
Alabama.
in, count me
Reverend
in.
Taylor, tell
And we can
Barbara
get some
Skinner,
more. We can get
Doris,
some more.
Sojourners, Crenshaw said, we need you in Alabama.
Yeah, no, I appreciate that. And I welcome the invitation, and I will definitely be there. I appreciate it, just the message of just, pure hopeful call to action that we just heard. And one of my hopes, and I don't think this is any way like a fanciful hope, I think it's a realistic hope, is that this strategy post Louisiana versus Calais to redraw districts all across the South and potentially in other parts of the country to the point where, we're now going to have this kind of racial gerrymandering civil war is really could backfire. We can help make it backfire.
That's right.
Right? Because if we do
If we show
massive voter turnout,
Yeah.
massive voter turnout, because I think this has really pissed off a lot of people. I know that's not a
That's
biblical
right.
word, but I think it's really pissed off a lot of people and kind of gotten people's attention in a way that some things haven't up until now. And so we need to channel that righteous indignation and anger in ways that really help to get more people out to vote, out to protest where necessary, that because they've now diluted Black voting power, they've actually made a lot more congressional districts more competitive.
Right.
And so those are winnable, right? And
That's right.
if we win, then we can actually do some of the healing work that Reverend Traci talked about, because I don't think it is good for our democracy to have these just crazy looking gerrymandered districts all across the country. We have been pushing Democrats, and most Democrats have supported major changes to our voting laws to get rid of gerrymandering across the board. But we can't even get there unless we can actually win many of these seats. And so, again, I'm saying this from a nonpartisan perspective, but I do believe that this strategy could really backfire, but it is up to us to make that happen.
And Adam, I just want to add that when we win, we have to realize that the battle is not over.
That's
just
right.
That's right. That's
And
right.
we have
Well
to
said.
keep building this hope, keep working toward it, because we tend to exhale after the election is done.
Right.
Right.
And even when we win, we still have a whole lot of work to do.
Absolutely.
That's right.
And people often ask me what happened to the civil rights movement. We, after 1968, we sort of developed a non-trust of each other. And I think it was because, I'll tell this story right quick, but one day one night I had a party for the SCLC people and the SNCC people at my apartment. And I woke up at 3 o'clock in the morning, and there was a man sitting in a chair next to my bed. And I said, "Who are you?" He said, "FBI." I said, "Okay, all right, turn over." There were so many FBI folk in the SCLC office and who had infiltrated SNCC and everything else that we developed a really no trust. And so we didn't know the people that we'd been working with before who they were. So we stopped talking to each other.
Mm.
So we can't develop a no talk, even if we, whatever, we need to develop a talking policy, most especially with each other.
Amen.
You know, as you're talking, the breadth of the strategy becomes really clear. There are just so many levels of work that have to be done. I think that if we were to sit down and say what are all the different components, we would have a real thing. But I think that's good. I think one of the things that impressed me or made an impact on me about Project 2025 is that they did have a strategy, and that wasn't just a political document, it was a historical document, it was an economic document. They had people from all the disciplines in there, and they all put their heads together to come up with a working whole. And so what I'm seeing,
they worked on it for years.
You say
They
what?
worked on it for years.
For years, and that's what
We
I'm
didn't want
seeing.
instant pudding.
Right.
But we have to have a strategy that's years and years.
Absolutely. Absolutely. That's what I'm saying, because we do get tired. I remember when we were at the
So
Haley,
why do you think they worked on it for years?
because they were bound and determined
Well,
that they wanted it to happen. They tried things and it
Absolutely.
didn't
They've been
work.
working on this since the Civil War.
Yeah,
You know, when they say they lost the Civil War, they say they
they
did
didn't.
nothing.
Right.
You know, and then they developed the Daughters of the Confederacy. And they've been working on this stuff all the while. I worked on getting Miss Park's marker down there where she was arrested. They agreed to put the marker down there, but they said that I had to put Hank Williams on the other side. So it's just in recent years that we have Miss Park's name on both sides, right at the Rosa Parks Museum. They are, I mean,
They're
they are
determined.
determined. They're
Determined.
determined.
Because they are afraid.
Yeah, they are. They are. But we
They
can
are
have that type of
afraid.
organization because we're not afraid. Of that much I
That's
do
right.
know. I think that as we talk about how the gene of trauma is passed down through generations, I think the gene of tenacity and hope, just
Right.
that raw hope has been passed down as well, because they have not been able to stomp us out. We can't be stomped out.
We are the economic engine of this nation.
That's
And
right.
And if
sure.
we
I'm gonna have
ever
it.
get together,
Right.
we can shut this nation down. We
Absolutely.
built it, we can shut it
Shut it
down.
down.
And they
Right.
know that. And that's why they strategize so long. Amen to us having a strategy, but we also need to know who we are. We are the economic engine of this nation.
That's right.
Yeah.
Because we're the
There's two other
consumers.
pieces just real quick that tie into this, and we've kind of touched on it, but I just want to name it more directly. So in addition to Project 2025, there has been a 50, 60-year strategy really since the creation of the religious right as a movement, which really came out of the victories of the civil rights movement, was a response to a backlash to
Right.
the victories of the civil rights movement. And there's a lot, this is where knowing our history is so important. There is this kind of whitewashed revisionist history of the religious right movement, that it was started to oppose abortion, which is absolutely a lie. It literally was started by Paul Warwick, who was a political
Right.
operative, Jerry Falwell, a religious right leader of a major church, who formed a political deal. And they basically said, we are going to convert white evangelicals who are mad about the changes as a result of the Civil Rights Bill of 1964 that is forcing the desegregation of our schools and our colleges and our seminaries into a political bloc that is going to be loyal to the Republican Party, and it's going to create a whole realignment in our politics. And so the galvanizing issue was that it was the desegregation of schools, which means the religious right had racist roots from the beginning.
From the beginning.
And that movement has morphed into the current white Christian nationalist movement of today. They literally had an electoral strategy. They had a legal Supreme Court strategy. They had a media strategy. They've created their own media ecosystem. to basically create their own kind of reality in many ways. And they have had a grassroots organizing strategy that has been funded to the tune of hundreds of millions of dollars by oil billionaires, by the DeVosses and the Kochs, and more recently by tech billionaires. And so I'm not saying this because I think that then makes our situation fatalistic or impossible. I actually believe that we could build a longer term strategy that's not identical to that, but that harnesses the power of our faith, right? And harnesses the power of our community. The other quick thing to say is like, I really think it's crucial that we stop seeding our faith and the language of faith and the integrity of our faith to the, the side that thinks they own it, right? And that's, I'm not talking to Reverend Traci, I'm not talking to Reverend Smith or Miss Crenshaw. I'm talking particularly to Democratic politicians who, for a long time, have become too afraid and too reticent about the power of faith. And I'm not saying that I want them to be sectarian. I'm not saying that I want them to be fake or phony with their faith. I want them to be authentic with their faith. And I want them to start investing a lot more in outreach and engagement and messaging that is going to resonate with people of faith, because they are still by far the vast majority of this country. And there's a way to do that that still honors religious liberty and still affirms our religious pluralism as a nation. And so I think it's part of the reason why, James Tallarico has struck a nerve and has kind of gotten a lot of attention in Texas, because he is speaking a very different language of faith than what a lot of people in Texas are used to. I think it's why, slightly different example, of course, but not just slightly, significantly different example, but Reverend Warnock is, comes out of the Black church tradition and is still a pastor, and yet is being a pastor called him into serving as a senator. So I'm just saying that I think there's a really important way in which we need to reclaim the power of our faith rhetoric and our faith traditions, because they have been corrupted and hijacked by others that are trying to use them for ill, and we've got to start using them more for good.
Adam, I agree with that 100%. And can I add that we also have to start calling one another in for corrupting our faith narrative.
Yeah.
For promoting biblical illiteracy, for not teaching a gospel that demands that we show up for one another in social ills. We have traded the prophetic tradition in too many instances for a name it and claim it quick deed faith.
Yeah.
And that faith will not hold in moments like this. So I know that's not what you're talking about, but amen to the politicians, but also we have to start calling and holding preachers and pastors accountable who are not talking about the things that we need to be talking about. We don't need more cars. We don't need more clothes. We don't need any of those kind of material things. We need the gospel as it was presented in scripture by an Afro-Semitic Palestinian rabbi named Jesus. And until we start talking about feeding the hungry, clothing the naked, housing the poor in our churches again, we still have work to do.
Lots of it.
That's a good point. Really good point.
Such a good conversation. Every time we have one of these conversations, I feel like we can go on and on and on, but there's so much to talk about. But this has been very rich, and I'm hoping that we have tapped into kind of stimulated the imaginations of people who maybe have been sitting around thinking that there's nothing they can do. There's a lot that we can do. And this whole thing about voting being a strategy and everything that we do being a strategy and not just an emotional response, I think is really, really, really critical. And there's so many different ways that people can join the movement per se. So I am really grateful. All of you got me thinking, and it's really great. I think I missed every single question in the chat because I was just busy listening to y'all. So
Adam, can you put the link for the poll chaplains?
I think
there, but we'll put it again just so it's at the top of
I think that it was in the chat. But yeah, but I think that, and we will.
Can you share?
Go ahead.
Would you share with us how we all can be in touch with one another?
Yeah,
And
I
I
will.
want to say, if we used to go to meetings, we said, why are we here and what is our assignment? So
Yeah.
from
Amen.
this conversation, what is our assignment?
My assignment is to get to Alabama in August because
Reverend
I
Taylor,
don't want Miss Crenshaw coming looking for me. Get to Alabama in August
that's right.
and get these fellows on the ground so that they can help mobilize and be trained and teach and talk. That's my assignment.
Please let me know those dates in August because I might join you in Alabama, Reverend Traci. Part of my assignment is certainly to not just recruit poll chaplains, but to really make sure that this election is free, fair, and safe, as I said before. And again, that's a lot of different things tied into that. Voter education's key, get out the vote is key, making sure people do vote is key. But now we actually also have to make sure that they can vote and that their vote is actually counted, right? So we are really going to be vigilant through all of those stages of the process. We also just, I didn't really mention this part of our work, but, we really started as a publication. We have a magazine and a digital publication I'll put it in the chat, sojo.net. We write about the intersection of faith, politics, and culture, all through a commitment. Our kind of tagline is faith in action for justice and peace. So we'd love to have you check out some of our content. We write about kind of all the issues that we just talked about. And we'd love to be in close relationship and solidarity with all of you.
So if people want to get in touch with you to find out how they can get involved with what you're doing, can you put an email address in the chat that they can refer to, please?
Reverend Taylor.
Yes. Oh, yeah.
That question was
oh, yeah. I'll put it in the chat. So it's sojo.net, and then it's my email is ataylor@sojo.net.
And I put our website in the chat. So
faithoutloud.org.
you can contact me that way.
Well, I'm 83, and so all this little stuff y'all talking about, can you all send me, my email is doriscran@gmail. If you all could send that to me, because this thing y'all talking about, I'm not swift enough to.
Yes, ma'am.
No problem. And if I could just say, I have been, looking at a lot of the comments and some questions in the chat. So I really appreciate all of that back and forth. I know we weren't able to respond to a lot of it, but some really good insights and comments there.
And if you try to figure out a way to maybe get our participants to answer some of the questions, if I can gather the questions from the chat and send them out, maybe people have chance, because I do think the questions are important. It's just that I have a problem talking to people and looking at the chat at the same time. So that's my weakness. So
I also love something Dr. Barbara Williams Skinner has been talking to me about lately. She's come up with this thing called Take 5. And I really like this notion of Take 5 because the problem is so big, the mountain is so big. Sometimes you get paralyzed because you don't think you can really make a difference. Yeah. And so she's getting these cards printed up that just say Take 5. Today, talk to 5 people in your family. Talk to 5 people in your neighborhood. Talk to 5 people in your community of worship, if you have a community of worship. Talk to 5 people in your workplace. Talk to 5 people that are strangers to you. And as Mrs. Crenshaw has reminded us, remember you have 2 ears. So don't do most of the talking. Just start the conversation and listen. Ruby Sales, we just honored her a little while ago. The question she asked still works. Tell me where it hurts. Mm-hmm. And if you listen to where it hurts and people know that you care, they will show up because it matters.
Well, thank you very, very much. I think Reverend Damien is on. Reverend Damien, are you on? Do you have anything that you want to say before we call it an evening? Reverend Durr, are you here? He's not here. Is he gone? Anybody tell me? Okay, well, we have I have the deepest feeling of there he's coming. So much appreciation for all of you. This has been a lively, informative, inspiring conversation. If you were in one of my classes, I would say, give me one word. Y'all know the road. One word that you take away from this conversation. What would it be, Reverend Adam? What would your one word be?
Ooh, you're killing me with one word. I'm gonna do two. I'm gonna do two.
Okay, I
All right,
figured.
resilience and transformation.
Okay, Reverend Tracy.
Can I have two?
Oh, go ahead. Go ahead.
Keep reaching.
Keep reaching. Okay, and Mrs. Crenshaw.
Lord Jesus. Um, uh, one word. Um, opportunity.
Good. Yay. Good, good, good. And I'm going to ask everybody who's listening to, in your own spirit, come up with your one word. What are you taking away from this? Don't have set and listen to this and just walk away and say it was good. What did it drop in your spirit? What is your one word? So with that, I'm going to turn it over to our General Secretary, Reverend Durr.
Thank you so much, Reverend Sue. And let me first thank all of our amazing, powerful practitioner panelists, right? This conversation is not just philosophical and ideological, which again, those are important conversations, but this is a conversation based on the work that all three of you are doing across this country and across the tender age, the teenage, the young adult age, the middle age, and the very age. So first, again, want to thank all of you for taking time out to share with us. And as Mother Crenshaw said, what's the assignment? One of the things I think we need to do, Reverend Sue, is that we need to maybe follow up with this same group, maybe in 60 days, or maybe after the August engagement in Alabama, just to come back and have some conversations and reflections and maybe some more things that can be helpful, right, as we continue to kind of move towards November. But I'm also just inspired because this was a substantive conversation around strategy and around challenges, but it's also a spirit-led and spirit-fed conversation because none of this can be done without the Spirit continuing to give us the strength, the stamina, the courage, and the resilience that's necessary in the times in which we live. So again, my appreciation to you, Reverend Sue, for always providing great facilitatory and moderation, great facilitation and moderation. But again, we also are encouraged by what we've seen in Georgia in the primary, what even happened in Louisiana. And then I don't know if you all saw how the students at Stanford responded to the Google CEO, where they got up and walked out of his commencement address. A significant amount of them, though some carrying Palestinian flags, others making their positions very clear about what they do not agree with as it pertains to what Google is complicit in. So I think we continue to see, right, a growing and evolving dissent that I think is also leading people to the polls. So we look forward to hopefully having another conversation again and seeing how we can continue to enable, mobilize, and empower others and encourage others to make their way to the polls and what needs to happen post that. Because I think Reverend Tracy's point, which is so important, is that's one part of the strategy. That's phase one, but then phase two, phase three, and phase four. So I think it's been an extremely rich conversation. And again, thank everyone for joining us on this evening. Reverend Sue.
May I say, as a board member, don't just show up, but support us. Samuel DeWitt Proctor is doing excellent work. Our new general secretary has inspired us all with the vision of what he has in store. And if everyone does a little bit, then we end up with a lot. So we have a campaign called 15 for the Future. We're asking you just to make a donation of $15 towards the future of what Samuel DeWitt Proctor has to offer. If you believe in this work, I'm asking you personally to please consider supporting this work financially. $15 one time, if that's all you can do. $15 monthly would be wonderful. And we have donors that will match what you give if you give it right now. So please consider the programming that you get, not just here, but every time Proctor opens its mouth, it says something worth hearing. Please give to this campaign. Thank you. And they didn't pay me for that. I might get fired for making that appeal.
No, thank you. We thank you so much. So with that, again, I just will give you all a bear hug for your participation, for your contribution, for your
Someone's
wisdom.
asking that you put the link in the chat, Damien.
The link. Somebody gonna
That
put
you're gonna have to help me to get my little contribution, because this
put the
QR
link
code
in.
and all.
Okay, bring the link in and then bring the slide back up, because you could take a picture with your phone, Mother Crenshaw, with the QR code on your phone. If we can bring the slide back up as well.
Oh my Lord.
With the various ways in which to give, and then we'll have them put it in the chat as well. So you should be able to scan the QR code with your phones at this time.
Well, wait a minute.
Or just take a picture of it, Mother Crenshaw.
I'm trying to find my camera. But I have everything going on here. I have a movie camera. I'm not, listen.
You know what? We can send
Well, I'll get to you. I'll get to you, Mother. There it is in the chat. It's also just been placed in the chat again for those who are there. But Mother Crenshaw, we'll make sure we get you squared away.
You put me down for 15 a month.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank all of you. I love you. Thank you. And thank you, all of you who were in this room and this conversation. I hope that you will share it with others, because we all need to be energized and injected with the message that this is a strategy and that we have the power to do it, because we have power. We have to share that message. I want to thank the team. We did this without our head tech person. So Larita and Jordan, you did it, my sisters. You did it. So thank you very, very much. And for the entire Proctor team and all your love, support, and work, I thank you. So God bless you. Our conversation next month is going to be on how to resist. So we invite you to come and mark it on your calendars. It'll be the third Monday in July, and we will see you then. So have a good evening. Adam, I thank you that your voice held up. Amen. And Mother Crenshaw, you are a joy. And Traci, you are my sister. You are my sister. I love you guys. All right. Take care. Have a great evening.
Thank you, Dr. Susan. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye, everybody.